Welcome back. It's been a while. It's been a while.
Anyway.
Yeah, and we're here on what a great day for us to be able to come back on Veterans Day, man. We're gonna get into all the good bass fishing stuff. We got some, obviously everybody's dressed. It's turned off cold outside, and it's gonna get even colder over the next week. And I think that's gonna do some really interesting things to Lake Fork, and might be a little counterintuitive, but I think it's gonna help us a lot on Lake Fork. I think it's gonna make the lake fish a lot better. We're going to break down all that and give you all the information on why and how to take advantage of that. But we'd be remiss if we didn't say something about what day it is today, with it being Veterans Day. And I know usually in this crowd, there's always at least a few. So if you're a veteran, raise your hand for me right now. Vic, I know you will. Raise your hand. Gary, raise your hand. Anybody else in the back there? No? Well, you guys come up here. Y'all get up here, so the people in the rest of the interweb can see you.
The interweb?
The interweb?
No, you stay here too.
Oh. Everybody knows.
I was just going to get out of the way for a second.
Y'all just come hang out on our shoulder for a second. So, Vic Pearsall, Army.
Army. Yep.
Gary Payne,
Marine Corps.
Hoorah, Marine Corps. Myself, Marine Corps. Cody is not a veteran, but Cody's sitting here because Cody's brother served in the Army, and Cody's brother paid the ultimate sacrifice for our country. So Cody's brother was killed in action in Afghanistan as an explosive ordnance technician. So if you're out there watching, thank a veteran, but don't just thank one. And for you guys that are here in the audience, do me a favor. Coming from a veteran, if these two guys agree, they'll nod their head when I'm done talking. If they don't, they'll slap me in the back of the head when I'm done. The thank yous are nice. We appreciate it. None of us agreed to serve or signed up or whatever to get a thank you. That's not what we want. And I don't want anything. But if you're going to be a person that feels proud about telling a veteran thank you, do me a favor. Help a veteran in a sincere way. Find an organization, find an individual veteran that needs it, and help. If you're going to tell veterans thank you, and you mean that, then stand by that and do something about it.
Amen.
That's all I got to say about that.
I agree with that.
Thank you.
Very good. You know, not only is it Veterans Day, but, oh man, 12 years ago today was the last dinner I had with Chauncey at Applebee's for Veterans Day. And you know what else happened that day? It was also my first date with my now wife.
Oh my gosh.
We were supposed to go to the movies, and he didn't know if he was going to make it in. Well, he called me and he said, "Hey, we're gonna make it in. We're gonna be at Daddy's." And I said, "Well, hey, let's go out to eat."
Yeah.
And so when I met my now wife,
yeah.
at the time I was like, "Hey, we're not gonna go to the movies for our first date." She said, "What are we gonna do?" I said, "We're gonna go eat dinner with my family."
First date, you're gonna meet the family.
That's right.
So you were fancy like that.
I was.
Well, listen, they were already married at that point. He was pretty much married there at that point. You going to meet this whole family, we might as well get married too.
That's right.
Yeah, that's good. Well, that's good, man. Well, we do appreciate all the veterans, and I try to, I don't just say what I said in a hollow manner. Everybody knows we have an event every summer to try and help veterans, and I do what I can in my own capacity to try and help my fellow veterans as well. So it's important. A lot of them out there need some help. A lot of guys that have been through some things that they're having a hard time getting over and recovering from and functioning in society. That's the biggest thing, is they have a hard time functioning in society because they lived in a different world. It's just, I can't sit here and explain it to you. Gary couldn't sit here and explain it to you. But me and Gary can talk about it. It's just a deal. If you don't walk in those footsteps, you really can't explain it. And there's a lot of guys that struggle functioning in society and moving on with things, so they need some help. So we need to do that as a country. We owe it to them for sure. So. Yeah. All right, let's get on talking about some bass fishing, man.
Yeah,
it's been a weird fall. The last 3 falls in Lake Fork. This year's probably compounded a little bit more by how extremely low the lake is. You can tell by the traffic on the lake right now that there's not a lot of people fishing it. And I think that's because it's been fishing kind of tough. And I also think that $3 a gallon gas ain't helping people wanting to come to Lake Fork, and the economy overall probably isn't helping people want to spend a lot of money on luxury fishing trips right now. And I understand that. I do. I get it. It's a tough time to be in this industry around this lake for a bunch of people. It's some of us are fortunate enough to have other revenue streams, but there's a lot of fishing guides out here that don't have that. And there's a lot of businesses around this lake that are dependent on the traffic, and it's a tough time. So first thing I want to say is it's important as we go into winter. Lake Fork's still a special place, and if you love the bass fish, for those that are behind the camera, man, get out here and support these businesses. They're going to need you this winter. It's been a tough fall for a lot of them. So, but what goes on in the fall out here is kind of a weird deal. And I do want to dispel a rumor. I heard one rumor, a vicious rumor, about Lake Fork that they shocked it and the population numbers were way down. There's no truth to that number. They have not conducted any shocking surveys on Lake Fork because if you know how those shocking boats work, they've got these big arms that extend way out off of them. You tell me how they're supposed to weave that in and out of all that timber that's sticking out of the water out there. They literally can't go into most of the areas of the lake and shock it. They can only do the open water, bare bank areas, and that's not going to give you good results. So they just haven't even done a shocking survey this fall. They've been doing it on other lakes, but they haven't even conducted one on this fall on Fork. What I can tell you is the ones they've done in the years previous to this, they've conducted them. There's been no drop or change, any significant change of any kind in population over the last 5 years. So as far as that goes, the population of the lake, the fish in the lake are fine. They're doing what they need to do to survive, and they're doing fine. For us as fishermen, we've kind of got an interesting dynamic going on here. Lake being low like it is, not a whole lot of shoreline cover for them to get on, really. I mean, there's some standing timber in some areas, some laydowns. Not really any bank grass of any kind. And the lake's been dropping, you know. It shouldn't really be dropping once we get to that. This time of year, October, November, doesn't usually drop near as much. But our lake's been dropping quite a bit. And I'm assuming they've been pulling some water. And in years past, I know for a fact, in years past, they have pulled specifically in October and November. And it seems like ever since they've started that trend, that it changes this lake in October, November. These fish are used to a very stable environment where the water levels really don't change much. If you look at what's happened, even though the lake's low, they manually pulled it down to 6 foot low last December to work on the dam. We have literally stayed between 5.5 foot and a little less than 7 foot low for the entirety of the year. So for an entirety of a year, the lake has varied 1.5 foot max. Now, when they pulled water in October, we dropped almost 1 foot in a month. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. To those fish in Lake Fork and what they're used to in their world, that is a huge, impactful situation to drop 1 foot in a few weeks, 4 weeks.
They gained 1 foot during all that.
So it's up, down. And what are they used to? They're used to very stable, right? Yeah, it's been a... and ever since they started pulling that water, I've noticed that the fall bite that was here 4 or 5 years ago was awesome. I mean, it was, you got deep and catch some fish if you wanted to. You could just go run the back of any creek and throw a square bill and get a bite. And if you knew the right stretches of the right creek, you'd catch a bunch of big ones. And that just hasn't been the case. But here's what I do know. Lake being low, them trying to pull some water too here lately. The time that the lake to me has fished the best when the lake's low, whether it was 2011 or whether it was this past winter or this past summer, is at the extreme times of year. The lake actually fishes much more consistently day to day in the really hot or the really cold times of year. Does anybody know why that is? Does anybody have a thought of why that might be?
Deep water, concentrated.
So those fish are already getting concentrated in less space because the water's low. So you go to the times of year when those fish all have to do similar things, right? So in the wintertime, what a fish going to do? They're going to group up in some deeper water in a creek channel bend, offshore, suspended, but they're going to get more condensed, pull more fish away from the bank in the mid-depths, right? Because if you go out there and try to find fish going down the bank right now, it's a needle in a haystack because it all looks the same, right? But now you get all those fish off the bank, now we can start concentrating on some contour lines, creek channel swings, humps, whatever it is that you want to target, and there's going to tend to be more fish congregated in those areas. No different than this summer when those fish didn't have any grass to stay in 3, 4, 5 foot all summer. Well, they all went offshore. So once you found fish, the school was bigger, they were more competitive, and they were there day after day. And the summer bite was very consistently good. The same thing's about to happen right now. This week is going to be the start of it. The water temps have already breached down into the upper 60s. We're going to start getting down it with this next week. We're going to get down into the lower 60s, most likely, maybe even the upper 50s. And when that happens, it's game time, guys. Those fish are going to get concentrated. And the first place that I'm going to start looking for them are on these bridge corners and bridge pylons in the creek arms. That is something that works every year around Thanksgiving. We're getting pretty close to Thanksgiving. Every year around Thanksgiving, those bridge corners and bridge pilings got a bunch of fish on them. Now, not talking about this one right here over the main lake. We're talking about Birch, Running Creek, still has a little bit of water on it, so it might hold some fish. If you can still get over that roadbed going to it anyway, you got to kind of slide in over that one. What else do we have? The three right here, Mustang, Little Mustang, Williams.
2946.
2946 almost serves as a creek bridge. But yeah, there's several bridges like that. Those are going to have some serious fish on them. Some serious fish on them right now, and especially this next week, they're going to get a lot more on them. And then the other thing just is going to be, to me, is going to be creek channel bend banks. If you have a bank where a creek channel gets close to it and kind of swings in and out of that bank for a long stretch, those fish are going to move. When they start pulling off that bank, they're going to pull to that creek channel. And so if you can get a long stretch of bank that has a creek channel that goes in and out and in and out and stays relatively close to that bank, that's going to increase your odds running into a group of fish somewhere in that stretch on that bank. And those are the types of areas that those fish are going to congregate to right now. Then as we get deeper into the winter, on into December, and especially when we get into January, we'll start having those pre-spawn creek channel bends play a role in those areas that they're going to eventually go into spawn into, get way out at the mouth of them, find the creek channel bend with the deepest drop off on it, and you'll be able to hammer down on them in those areas like that. But for right now, we're fixing to get some fish pulling off the bank in a major way this week, and it's going to concentrate them in those first areas coming out of the backs of those creeks and pockets, and that's going to be a lot of those bridges and those creek channel bend back. What do you think?
Yes, yes, and yes. And tomorrow, what we're going to focus on with the change of the weather, just as of today. So when the temperature does drop, like you said, they're going to get in those creek channels. What they're going to do is they're going to get to the deepest water near the shallow water as fast as possible.
The closest, deepest water they can get in.
That's
Yeah,
right.
and that's all relative, right? Like if you're up there in Running Creek, that might be 6 foot.
Yep.
And if you're out somewhere in Little Caney or Northwest Bay, that might be 15 foot.
Yep. And these fish that are already kind of somewhat deep, that have been hanging out on these points, these brush piles, like what I've been fishing.
Yeah.
They're going to pull out to these road beds, these bluffs, these dramatic ridge lines.
Well, and some of their numbers are going to increase. They're going to have some new ones join that group probably too. Yeah.
Yep. So tomorrow that's what we're going to be kind of focusing on.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you know me, I like road beds and all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, and I know something that you like to throw a lot is a finesse shaky head, like a little 1/4 ounce type of shaky head with a little finesse style 6 or 7 inch shaky head worm.
Yep.
But I'm gonna tell you, around those bridges and even around those creek channel banks is just an Alabama rig. This is the time of year that the Alabama rig was invented in bass fishing, so it came to be in bass fishing. I don't know, does anybody know the story of how the Alabama rig became a bass fishing bait? Because it's been a saltwater rig for a long time. That old umbrella rig been a saltwater rig for a long time. Nobody used it in bass fishing pretty much until a man named Paul Elias on a FLW tournament on Lake Gunnersville in November in the fall of the year. And where was he throwing it? He was throwing it on bridge corners and pilings in a creek arm on Lake Gunnersville is where he was throwing it. Same thing we're talking about doing here this time of year. And I'd be lying to you if I didn't tell you that I didn't learn that pattern on Lake Fork from watching him do it on Lake Gunnersville all those years ago. But that's when it started, man. Paul Elias, probably about 10 years ago now or so. Maybe I may be off on that number, but he was doing that deal on there, and it was like, those fish I'd never seen before was unbelievable. Well, that pattern still works. And the good part about it is now we've come up, back then he was throwing 5-inch swim baits, and man, that was a mess. I mean, that was a difficult thing to throw and a lot of money to throw away if you lost it. And now we've got Alabama rigs aren't quite as pricey as they were then. And we're throwing smaller swim baits, so they're a little bit easier to throw. You can throw them on smaller heads. We've got specific Alabama rig heads that are made down to a 1/16 of an ounce, usually easier to throw. And you can throw them weedless, right? So like for Lake Fork, for these creek channel bank stretches, what I like to do is I like to take and put 5 3-inch swim baits on an Alabama rig, but rig them on a very light-weighted, if any at all, swim bait hook. You know what I'm talking about? Little kill-weighted Owner Beast, little 3/0 swim bait hooks. And now what I can do, especially with the timber out of the water like it is, most of it's sticking up above the water line, you can kind of see the lanes pretty good, in the timber. and you can fire that Alabama rig around, and just pitch it and cast it around and work it between the timber lines. Let it go down a little bit, whatever depth you want to fish it at, depending on what depth your area you're in, and you can work it through there. And if you have, does everybody have live sonar? Live sonar? Anybody else? Live sonar? Live sonar? Live sonar? Pretty much all of us in here have live sonar now. So with that, and number one, an Alabama rig, sometimes you get to throwing something small on there, it's kind of hard to see your bait on your live sonar, right? We all know that, yeah. But throwing an Alabama rig, you can see that Alabama rig. It's easy to, I don't even think you got to be pointed right at it to see it. Like, you can see an Alabama rig on live sonar, so you know exactly what the depth is that your Alabama rig is at, right? It's really easy to control not only the depth, you can look out there and see what depth the fish are kind of, if they're suspended in that timber a little bit, now you can run your Alabama rig right above that depth or right at that depth, however you want to present it, using live sonar. It makes your life tremendously, so much easier for that pattern than it used to be. And with that weedless setup on an Alabama rig, what I found is that if there's a branch sticking out or something and you do happen to hang it up, just don't go to jerking on. I see a lot of people hanging up, do this, and a guy, don't do that with that Alabama rig. Just kind of leave it there, and if it won't just kind of shake loose, just go over and get above it, and if it's rig weedless, it'll just slide right up out of there. 99.99% of the time, I can't tell you the last time I lost one, just because you just don't get herky-jerky with it when it gets hung up. One thing about an Alabama rig, though, if you don't have the right gear, man, like it sucks to throw. So here comes the shameless plug time. Y'all ready? Who in here owns a big swim bait rod? Anybody? Big man, my man. What kind of swim bait rod do you own?
Me?
Yeah.
I got one. It's the Gary Loomis Edge, but I got it custom made.
Ooh, that's a nice one. That's a really good one. I want you to just put this in your hands and be straight up honest with me what you think about it. Because you've got a really, really good one. Like as
I
good
got
as
mine custom made.
Yeah, they're as good. That's as good as it gets, man. Hold it like you're gonna fish with it and tell me what you think.
Let's go, Brandon.
Hey, that's pretty. What are your thoughts on it? Does that feel like a swim bait rod size wise?
Yeah, that's about right.
It's about right. Did he shock you how light it was?
Yeah, I don't like the fat grip.
Don't like the fat grip, and
That's just you. I seen that.
Yeah, that's just me. So we actually make them with the other
Yeah.
grips as well, so you can get whatever grip you want.
It's just a wrap on it. You know what I'm saying?
But lightness wise,
It's
for a 7-Eleven heavy rod, that I don't know if you guys watched the video that I think we just put out yesterday, but I'm throwing an Alabama rig, and I'm just like, hey, that's a 5-hook, 8-ounce jig heads, and 5 swim baits on an A rig, and I'm just flipping it around like it's a spinner bait on this rod, but you put it in your hand, and it's like, and there's just nothing there. And that's
7-Eleven heavy.
put it in your hand,
Man,
man.
that's a drop shot rod right there, bro.
And that's the heaviest reel I own too, because I use a big reel for throwing those big heavy baits. A lot of line.
Yeah, I like that.
So
That's the one you made right there?
Yep, that's my big swim bait Alabama. We said earlier, you break it, you buy it. That's it.
I'm running prototype, is it? Break you run.
But anyways, we've got 6 models for sale right now. I brought them all in here with reels on them, so you guys can put your hands on them and check them out if you're interested.
How much is that?
$265. They're all $265.
Is that on the web?
It's on my website. It's also for sale downstairs in the store, and I think they're sold out of the swim bait model, but I've got more in the truck.
Came prepared, huh?
I sure did. Shameless plug. That's it. But like I said, we got 6 models, so any of those that y'all want to check out tonight, we've got them from 6'9" medium. We've got a 7-foot medium heavy. We've got a 7'2" light heavy, 7'6" medium heavy, a 7'5" heavy, which is a jig rod. And so if you're getting ready to go do some jig fishing this winter and looking for a rod, you might check that one out. And then, of course, we got that big giant sucker that I just showed you, that big. But having a rod like that for an Alabama rig that you put in your hand, it's just there's nothing there. But yet I can take an Alabama rig and just go like that. Hey, that makes all the difference in the world when you're fishing an Alabama rig. So whether you buy mine or you buy it's the new Loomis model. What's it called?
Edge.
The Edge. Whether you buy a Dobbins Champion Extreme, that's a good one. What's another really high-end rod? Never mind, he's not allowed to say. I almost forgot. We're not allowed to say that. Listen, you can't say their name on here. We might get sued. Anyways, any rod that you buy gets you like if you want to throw an Alabama rig, and I highly recommend it in the fall, you need to get you a rod, like a real rod that's real light but yet can handle that big old sucker, because it's one of the few techniques. You know, like if I'm throwing a frog and I've got a $100 rod in my hand, or I've got a $200 rod in my hand, or a $400 rod in my hand, I'm still just twitching a frog and watching it twitch on the surface. You know, and yeah, some of the twitching, if the rod's lighter, is going to help. But it's not that big of. I can fish a frog all day, regardless of the rod you put it on. Mm-hmm. An Alabama rig, if you get on the wrong rod, you're going to have to take a break. You have to take a break. You know, big swim baits are the same way. So, anyways, talk to me about shaky head fishing, because so for right now, for this next week, what's coming up? It's going to be an Alabama rig. It's going to be a jerk bait.
I was about to say a jerk.
And it's going to be a little shaky head. So tell me something about a little shaky head and how you're going to fish that.
So I mean, I'm also going to do a little finesse ball head jig as well. But no, I'm actually, when you say finesse, I'm kind of a parafisherman like you. So my finesse is like a 5/8 shaky head with a 7/0 hook.
Dude, you throw a drop shot like all the time. How you gonna call yourself power fishing when you throw
Because
a drop shot?
I don't throw a drop shot. I throw a power shot. There's a difference, all right?
I can't get him to throw a drop shot anymore.
No, it's 17-pound test
Rub that
line
on him.
with a 3/0 hook. That ain't a drop shot.
It's a Texas size drop shot, that's for sure.
Power shot. So
Yeah.
it's just a reverse Carolina rig.
Reverse Carolina rig, I like it.
But no,
It's a North Carolina rig or South Carolina rig. Depending on I don't know which way you want to go there.
yeah. But no, so these shaky heads on these ridge lines, with that tail when they're coming up and that tail just doing this. I mean, just the motion of the water. You don't even really have to work it this time of year.
That's the power of a shaky head, right? Yeah. That it can be sitting dead still and get a bite for you.
Yep. I don't know how many times my customers have backlashed, and as I'm getting it out,
yes,
it's tugging. Yeah.
So. Yeah. That's the deal that I see with people, and I fish shaky head quite a bit too, especially this time of year. I always try to tell people that the power of that bait, the strong point of that bait, is that it'll catch a fish while doing absolutely nothing, while just sitting there.
Yeah. So
slow down. Like, people want to drag it along like it's a jig or a Carolina rig. You kind of drag along and it kicks the bait up behind it, and they kind of drag that shaky head along. No, you need to count each individual bump with that shaky head. Yep. So, like, if you're dragging on a firm bottom, y'all know what I'm talking about when I say you drag a Carolina rig on a firm bottom, you feel bump, 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 bump. Well, no, with a shaky head, you need to feel bump, 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 not bump, bump, bump. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, you got to painfully slow fishing with a shaky head.
Yeah. I've been fishing with a 1-ounce, 10-aught shaky head with the big perm, and been smashing them with it. I mean, straight up. But
are you being serious or are you kidding around?
No, I'm being.
Because that's like a summertime deal.
I know, but everybody tells I'm telling them we're going shark fishing when I get it out, because they're like, oh my god.
Yeah, no, that's a big old hook in
it. It is
thing.
a big old hook.
It's a big old hook.
But no, we have been still catching fish with that big thing.
Wow.
And up until about midweek this week, we had to downsize, and so we downsized to a 1/2 ounce, 5/8, and to a 6 to 7 inch worm.
Yeah.
And we started catching. So
there is something, and there's been something to this for a long time on this lake. A straight tail worm in November. For whatever reason, we get to November, and if you're a dragger, you like to daub around. We like throwing creature baits, and we like throwing big ribbon tail worms in the summer, and we throw jigs a lot, winter and the fall. But man, you're hard pressed to beat either a Senko style or a trick worm style of worm this time of year, almost any way you want to rig it. And I talked about this on a tackle talk on Tuesday maybe, but the two baits for me that you really got to have tied on this time of year if you're going to do any offshore mid-depth fishing on Lake Fork is going to be a little shaky head with a trick worm or any kind of shaky head worm, straight tail worm, and then a finesse Carolina rig with a Senko style bait. Mm-hmm. That's the two that, they've got to be tied on this time of year. It's not hardly anything that you're going to catch more fish on out here than that right now.
Well, exactly this time last year is actually when Vic, went to Richland Chambers, and he caught that 11-13? 11, oh yeah.
Whatever it was 11 something.
Yeah. With,
that's good enough. For the record, 11 anything good enough.
Well, no, you should have seen the big old shad it spit up before we got to weigh in.
No kidding.
Oh yeah, we were going to be like them walleye guys.
Shove it. At least you would. Don't put any lead in there before you shove it. Like, that'd be a whole other level. Let's shove the lead in the shad, then put the shad back in. That'll be the next guys that get caught.
But that's what he caught it on, was a little wobble head with a little Cinco. You know, so.
We'll say, yeah, straight tail worm. I'm
Yep.
telling you. And it is. It's one thing that I do appreciate about the fall that I really think is cool is you can go from lake to lake to lake, and they pattern the same, whether it's early in the fall or late in the fall. Early in the fall, you get you a small little spinnerbait with a small little willow blade and a little bitty rattle trap, and you go to any lake around here in September and early October, and you're going to catch a mess of fish doing that. Those two things, just winding those. You get to November, you throw a straight tail worm, that Finesse Carolina Rig Cinco or that shaky head trick worm, and you go to any lake around here, and you're going to catch fish doing that. It just, the patterns really replicate well in the fall, and the reason is they're all doing the same thing in the fall. They're all pinning up shad and eating them. Now, what does a worm look like a shad? No. I think when you get to later in the fall and the water starts cooling off and those fish start getting a little bit more finicky, it's just an easy presentation. It's something easy for them to eat, or for whatever reason they just like it. But they all pattern very similar lake to lake.
Yeah, they do. For sure. And, you know, them big girls are really just going to gulp up anything they can get right now, too.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's it's an odd thing with this bass fishing deal, how we overestimate their intelligence and ability to decipher what we're presenting to them a lot. Because the reality is these fish eat anything that they think is legit that they can get in their mouth easily. Now, there may be times they don't want to expend much energy, so they ain't going to travel very far for it or whatever. But if you present it right to them, and it's easy, and they're convinced that it's something that they can eat, they're going to eat it. I mean, they will eat absolutely anything that moves. And at times when they really go to feeding, they prove that, because you can catch them on anything. You know, when they're on a bed, they prove that, right? Because you can catch them on anything. The bait you throw doesn't even matter when they're on a bed. It's about getting it in the right area and irritating them and all that. But yeah, it's an interesting thing how much we think about all. We take so much time thinking about all these baits, and I think a lot of times we're trying to think, well, we got to mimic what they're eating. We got to do it, present it this way. No, really, it's just about getting it in their face and keeping it there, and then every once in a while when it's there, make it do something erratic to make them react to it. Mm-hmm. It's really all it's about. It's a lot of times the bait that you pick, to me, needs to be, the decision needs to be based on what can I fish efficiently in this cover or in this area, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important thing in bait decision is, can I get it in and out and make a lot of casts and keep that bait in their face a higher percentage?
Yep. So with a jerk bait, what, you know,
talk to me.
What depths are you going to kind of key on right now?
Well, for me, the jerk bait deal right now is going to be the same thing as the Alabama rig. It's going to be bridge corners and pilings, and it's going to be creek channel baits, like we talked about earlier. I'm going to probably mostly throw the shallower jerk bait.
Yeah.
There will be times in certain situations that I'll throw the +1s and the +2s, which is, to me, I mean, the Mega Bass is about as good of a jerk bait as you can find, and they're labeled in +1, +2, and I'm not real good with details like bait names, so I don't even know what all of them are even called. I think 6 Cents calls theirs the DD.
Yeah.
They just got one deeper version that's a DD, but I like, if you ask me what Lucky Craft called their pointer, is it a +1? I don't know. I mean, to me, it's going to be a Lucky Craft regular and a Lucky Craft +1 and +2, just because I'm used to Mega Bass calling it that.
Right.
Primarily, it's going to be those 4 to 6 foot jerk baits. I think a lot of these fish are still going to be high in the water column. If I notice them all down lower than that and I need to get something down to 8 or 10 foot, then I'll reach in there and grab that other one.
So with that being said, you know, I'm glad you said that, because something I did last year at this time on that same pattern when they wouldn't really bite that jerk bait is I would actually fish a weighted Cinco Texas rig around those stumps and just popping it and jerking it through as well. It has just a little bit more of a presentation than that jerk bait.
Straight tail worm.
Yeah.
Straight tail worm.
You do what?
Take a weighted Cinco with a nail weight in it on Texas rigs. You know, no weightless, no chicken shit rig.
He started
like
weightless Texas rig style, so weightless on EWG hook and put a nail weight in it.
Yeah. That way it just sinks just a
they're
little bit
talking
faster.
Like the fluke type flukes.
Right.
Like a fluke and walk the fluke with the weight like that. Because
Yeah.
it kind of looks a lot like.
Yeah, you can. I mean, I didn't do a fluke last year, just a Cinco, but it's the same
It seems
principle.
like it gets down.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll tell you another way to present that. If you don't want to mess with a nail weight, like the way that I prefer to do it is VMC makes a hook called a drop dead hook. and it's got a very, very light, and I don't even know the numbers, like 132nd or 164th or whatever. Very, very light belly weighted, keel weighted EWG style hook with a screw lock and all that. And even in the springtime, dude, just rig a Senko on that, like weightless Texas would rig it like a swim bait, and in that little shimmy that a Senko does when you wacky rig it, it'll do it times 2 on that little deal. I mean, it really has a fall. And then for like that deal, if you want to jerk it, now that thing's perfectly balanced and keel weighted, and it does all that jerk bait stuff.
Right.
Yeah. VMC Drop Dead. I see you shaking your head. That's the name of it, right? Right? Yeah. Okay. I thought it's like a black weight. It's not even a lead weight. It's a black weight on the bottom of it. Yeah. It's really good.
Hey, I got a question about the jerk bait. Is
Okay.
that when Patrick Walters won it?
Hmm?
It was November.
Yeah.
A couple years, 2 years.
Yeah. What's today? November what? 11th, of course.
Was it 21st? Something like
Yeah, it was. I think the tournament started on like the 19th, or it was like 1920. Yeah.
And when he got 21st, that was he's doing what you're talking about, right? But the water was 6-7 foot high.
Well, it was a little low that fall. Actually,
It was 3 foot low.
it was 2 or 3 foot down that fall because they had pulled water in October, November.
Yeah, I just looked at the locations. I was looking at them because I remembered it.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at the locations, and he was out. He was out toward the main lake, just right on them.
Well, one of them, where he caught most of the fish that he caught in that tournament,
Yeah.
and most of the fish that he counted and weighed in that tournament, was right here.
Yeah.
It was right around the corner from here.
Yeah, because I looked at it. I was
Yeah.
looking at it.
Yeah.
And I was trying to look at it from the deal, and you can't really tell much because they ain't gonna zero in real close.
No, having
Trust me, I was looking at houses going.
So having the advantage of being here as much as I am, and the ironic thing is where he caught most of those fish was right out in front of Bridgeview RV Park. And my good buddy that a lot of y'all know, Zach Watts, has had a camper in Bridgeview since I've known him. So that dock he was fishing out in front of in that little stand of timber, me and Zach have sat out there in the middle of the night throwing worms in the middle of that timber a bunch of times. So, I mean, I know that area like the back of my hand, and he was doing that little stand of timber out in front of that dock. And then he was doing the point up around the point, right around the corner from that as you're coming this way at First Point. He caught a couple of key fish on that. And then at the end, he caught some down there at the mouth of Little Caney.
That's what I was.
At the mouth, right at the end, when he went over 100 pounds, he caught a couple down there at the very mouth of Little Caney. But most of the fish he weighed in that event, I think on that last day, he was starting to kind of run out of fish up here a little bit. And so he moved around a little more. He caught a couple key fish down there. But, yeah, he was more main lake. But you got to remember, he was the only guy on Earth that had ever brought a live scope to Lake Fork and targeted those fish. And I've had this conversation with Patrick, and he has agreed with me and said, yeah, you're probably right. When I told him that, what's really crazy, Patrick, is if you would have known where a lot of fish really were stacked up at, there's no telling what you would have caught. And he's like, yeah, you're probably right. He goes, I was just cruising around looking on my live scope and found something there. But he was the only one that had ever done that technique here. So he had those fish to himself completely. He didn't need to find the mother lode. But if that joker would have taken that live scope to the right creek stretch, like if he'd have taken that thing halfway, 2/3 of the way up Little Caney and done that, dude, like, you know what I'm saying? And I said Little Caney, but it could be...
It could be birch, anything.
it could be birch. It could be, glade. If he'd have taken that thing down that middle of that roadbed and glade that year, oh my God. You know the roadbed that's out in the middle of the glade that has a tree line? Dude, if he'd have done that thing out there, ain't no telling.
It's like 6 inches deep right now.
Like he was not fishing the best areas to fish on the lake. He was just doing something. He had those fish completely to himself, so he didn't need a whole lot to win, It was interesting, though. That's
He
for
was
sure.
doing great till he said, "Roll Tide."
You lost him.
Well,
You
I
just
see.
don't watch him now. We ain't gonna listen to you.
I see that purple and yellow sitting next to you, so and I see the Saints on yours, so I think I know where this is going. Listen, y'all can't have no hard feelings right now. Y'all just got the best of them now. Y'all ought to be cloud 9.
That's right.
Y'all ought to be on cloud 9. Y'all just ended
I'm
that.
pretty sure how Brian Kelly
like
beat them now.
So it don't really matter to me.
Have you guys seen any of those videos from like weddings where it's like a Alabama fan husband and an LSU fan wife,
He smashes.
and it's the cake is Alabama.
Oh yeah.
It's all Alabama cake, and he's so happy about it. and he cuts into it's purple and yellow on the inside.
And she's just smiling the whole time.
Yeah, the first one I saw, the guy just completely smashed the cake and threw it off the table.
That's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
Let me see your speaker.
Go Tigers.
Please don't put me on there.
You're gone. Start chewing gum.
Man, anyways.
It's good for you, I guess.
You know what I'm talking about.
Well, it's kind of sad because I'm kind of, frustrated right now because I ain't had any cigarettes, snuff, or energy drink all this week. And I was in the emergency room Tuesday night.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my blood pressure, right after we got on the phone,
Really?
before we did that live, my blood pressure went through the
So
roof.
talking to me raises your blood pressure.
We were talking about football.
Hello.
But no, so I had to go, and that's what they keyed it into was the energy drinks and the cigarettes, and just a couple days without it, dude. I feel 100% better, but I still am a little agitated.
Other than being a little twitchy and irritable. Yeah. That's it. Jerkbait fishing, everybody, I mean, we've gone over it probably half a dozen times on this channel, but rod, man, 6'9" medium. It's the rod I throw a jerkbait on. Got the one I designed out here, of course. Line is real important to me on a jerkbait. Line's so important. You know, if you get too big of a line, whether you use mono, you can use mono to keep it up in the water column and give you a little extra shock absorption. I think that's not a bad thing at times. I think it's actually a helpful thing at times. Very beneficial. In springtime, I throw a jerkbait on mono on purpose. This time of year, I'll throw it on fluorocarbon because I want it to get on down there. But the size of your line matters with a jerkbait because that deal is such a finite action that you're trying to create the most erratic action you can. And if your line is too heavy, too big, too strong of a poundage, it'll overpower that jerkbait and kind of pull it through the water and won't give it all that erratic stuff. The other thing is tying a loop knot. Everybody know how to tie a loop knot? If you're going to fish a jerkbait, you absolutely need to be throwing it on a loop knot. That is a must to me. If you tie any other kind of knot versus a loop knot, and then you put them two jerkbaits in the water and twitch them and look at them, you'll be like, whoa. Like, it's a huge difference. Huge difference.
Hey, partner, there's another chair right over here. You good? Okay.
I didn't even see him over. Well, he snuck in a side door on us.
He's been back there.
That's the FBI. Y'all better watch out. He's over
He's been
here.
back there all quiet. the whole
Yeah, I didn't even know he was here.
There's a chair right here.
Yes, sir. We got chairs.
Come on down.
All right. Well, I guess this is kind of the time where we just see if y'all got any questions on anything. I know we've asked a few in between. That's just how we do it anyway. But anybody got any questions on anything?
Well, you
Y'all fish any of the,
You can go ahead. Yeah.
not necessarily this time of year, but the Parks and Wildlife, the fish habitats they put
Artificial
in?
reefs that they
Yeah.
put up? I don't search them out and intentionally go to them, but I've happenstance found several of them, and they hold fish. I know that. They do hold fish.
Yeah.
I probably should search them out because I've caught some fish off of them.
Well, I do fish them, and I'll fish any of the brush piles you can find, but I'll put my own out too.
Yeah.
Like me and Vic, I don't know how many times we've gone
He's a
out
big brush pile guy.
2 o'clock in the morning and put some out just because you want to keep them secret for at least a week.
Yeah, until somebody drives by as you're catching one off.
Yeah, you can go on the website, and they got the
Yeah.
let longs, and it's
Yeah.
taking you right to them.
So I do have another little project to tell you guys about that they're doing right now. It'll actually, we'll talk about it at the end of a video. We've got a video coming out next week with Jake Norman, our area biologist. Really a lot of information in that video. So if you guys want to learn some real good fish behavior stuff, that's a good video to check out. But they're actually undertaking a project right now where Jake is creating, I think, was it just one or multiple?
I think it's just one.
Just one, like a really big, significant rock pile on Lake Fork. Like offshore, deep, and he's going to handpick where it goes. And he fishes. He knows his stuff when he goes fishing, so he's going to put it in a good spot. But they're going to make like a big rock habitat in Lake Fork. And they got a grant from somebody. And what they were planning on doing was fan casting some grass seed along the dry lake shore while the lake was down. The problem with that is, if y'all seen the lake shore, it ain't really a dry lake shore. It's brush taller than your head. So they can't really drive around in a gator fan casting lake seed all over the lake. So they took that money that was given to them to do that, and they're going to make big old rock pile.
I like it.
Yeah, it'll be something very unique for Lake Fork because Yeah, we've got rock in the lake, a lot more rock than I thought we had, honestly. Since the lake's been low, I've realized there's a lot more rock. But we don't have like a giant rock pile somewhere down, down in the water column where it needs to be. So we're about to, thanks to Texas Parks and Wildlife.
That's cool. I like that.
I didn't realize there was that much gravel.
Yeah, a lot of hard bottom.
Like today, I was looking at it. I realized that
Gravel,
was
old broken crushed shell, iron ore, chunk rock.
Now, how big a rock? Because there's one spot that I fished that's got a bunch of rocks, probably about yay big. Are they going to be like showing up big?
I don't know.
You didn't say?
I don't know. I'd have to ask Jake that honestly, but I mean, from the sounds of it, it's going to be significant. Yeah. Vic, what were you fixing?
Well, you was talking about the jerk bait the line. What line did you use? Because I use like 12-pound Vizex.
Yeah, 12-pound Vizex is probably my go-to on Lake Fork. I have a hard time going underneath that. To me, really, the best line is probably 10-pound. 10-pound fluorocarbon is probably the best line to use for a jerkbait. Man, I just have a hard time going quite that low, especially if I'm going to be around timber on Lake Fork. Even with 12-pound, it's still like, hold on for dear life. Like you hook one, and if it's a big one, you're just praying and holding it and hoping it doesn't wrap you up in a tree or something. And it's real important with the jerkbait to have the right setup and the right line because, when you've got a treble hook bait, I think you need to look at it like this. Take one of those treble hooks and then cover up two of those hooks and look at that one little bitty hook sticking out. There's going to be plenty of times when that's all you got. So how big of a rod and line would you want if you knew you were only going to hook it with that little bitty hook? That single prong of a treble. And that's why having, a 6'9", basically buggy whip, medium action, really lighter action rod, and that 10 or 12-pound line at most is key to me on a jerkbait because it will force you. If you've got a medium action rod and 10 or 12-pound line, you, without even thinking about it, you will play that fish better. Like, you'll know you're subconsciously you can't pull on him as hard with that gear in your hands. You can feel it. You know how it is. 6'9" medium, you set the hook on a 3-pounder, it's like, woo, I got one. You know what I mean? Whereas out here, take that 7.5 broomstick jig rod I got, you set the hook on a 3-pounder, he goes flying over your head. So it's you can feel the difference, and it forces you to slow those bigger fish down. It's the main reason to me why it's so important to have that lighter rod, lighter gear.
Yep. It's the same. I use the same rod on my topwater. When I'm throwing a walking bait or a little popper, same thing. Light gauge hooks.
If I'm throwing the smaller ones, yes, like a popper for sure. And the smaller walking baits, yeah. But if I'm throwing some of them bigger spooks, I size up and go to like 30-pound braid. Like I'll throw those bigger spooks on my 7.6 medium heavy. Any other questions? Anybody want to hold a rod and check them out? Do you? There you go. Y'all take them and pass them around. Try not to break them for me.
Try that.